Okay, so to actually find an image online, you can always try Googling like cupcake seamless normal map. You want seamless just so that if you do like duplicate it across the mesh, it won't leave like obvious marks. But I think I tried that and there's no one's made a normal map yet of cupcakes. How rude. Second option is you can make one yourself. So if you're having a lot of trouble finding something to use, you can make one with Photoshop. If you don't have access to Photoshop, we have Photopea. So Photopea is basically like a online. Oh, sorry about the ads on the right side, but Photopea is a online version of Photoshop you can use. It has most of the same tools that you would need. Where's my ad blocker? Oh no, disabled on this site. I'll move my face as a sensor. Beautiful. Oh my, oh now it's a child, so we're fine. Censor this child. Okay. So if you were trying to make your own, you would import this image. So I'm not actually going to show it. I'll post a video that covers it nicely. But there is the same thing exists both in Photoshop and Photopea. And again, Photopea is free. I'll post a link to this as well. But there's going to be a section called 3D, like filter and then 3D. And then I think in Photoshop you have the option to make a bump or a normal map. I would recommend making a normal map, but this will convert your image into a normal map. And usually you'll want to like alter your image a little bit first just to like exaggerate the lighting on it. But you do have the option to make your own. But other than that, there are a lot of free resources online that have like full packages of PBR materials. So one that I'll post that I like using is CC0 Textures. And a lot of the time I'm just like very creative with my normal maps. So I think I ended up downloading like a sand or a mud normal map for my cupcake. But if you search something, you can see it's like listing these little balls of material, and this is going to give you many like multiple maps that you would plug in to Blender to make this material. So in this case, like I'm going to ignore like what color it looks like, the roughness of it. I'm really just looking at the depth of the shading to kind of look like for something that mimics our cupcake. But again, this has like a bunch of different materials on it for future use. And when you download this, it's going to give you a folder. So I would recommend downloading just the 2K version. This is how much like resolution each one has, and I don't foresee any of us needing 4K resolution for these. So you should be fine with the 2K. It's going to give you a folder. Let's see where I put mine. In your download section, and then if you right click that folder, it's going to give you, I mean mine's not showing it, it's going to give you multiple images that define that material. And you can see there's a color, so I downloaded a fabric one. I have color, displacement, normal, opacity, and roughness. For the cupcake one I found, it had ambient occlusion, color, displacement. So you've heard some of these words. Color is the base color. So this would be just the color of the dirt. Displacement map, so we mentioned what that is. That's to actually change how far your mesh is sticking out. Normal map, which is what we're aiming for. And there's a few more that I'll show you how to plug in. after I showed the normal map, because the normal map is the most important one in my opinion. I mean, color will be important. Normal map is best map. So once we have those, I would recommend making a materials folder, and don't do it like I did. I have them all like clumped together. You should make a folder for like each of them. So I would like label this like green fabric and this one like sand. But you'll be able to access this folder in this top left area. So you can like hop around in here and find your folder of your material. And in this case, we want our normal map. So which one was the better one? We'll go for this one. Again, this might take a little experimentation if you don't exactly have a cupcake normal map, because I'm using sand right now. Concrete works wonders for many different things as well. I think when I modeled the avocado, I used concrete as the normal map for the like exterior of it. So to bring this in, I'm just going to drag and drop it, and it brings it right into my node editor. I think there's another way to bring it in, but I won't mention it because I don't remember. So let's just move these out of the way for now because we're not going to use them anymore. And the one important thing about this image that we just brought in is to say what type of image it is. So any image you bring in, it's automatically going to say it's an RGB, so like a color image. But that's only the case for anything you bring in for base color. Other than that, you're usually going to choose non-color. So even though our normal map, if you look at it, it's colorful, but that's not how Blender is going to be reading this map. It's going to be reading it as a non-color map. So we want to change this, and I'll show you in a second like what happens if you don't change it. And then the second thing we want to do, like we did with the basic noise texture, is to tell Blender how to use this map. So we want to tell Blender to use this as a normal map. So we're going to do Shift A and go to Vector and bring in the normal map option. And click that down. And let's snap that to normal. And then we need to connect our image to this normal map. So grab color, snap it to color, and now you can see on my cupcake I have this little sandy texture. And again, this might be where you go in, alter your roughness if you have to. Ooh, moist cupcake. If you didn't change your color space to non-color, it's gonna still have that texture on, but it's gonna have this weird like glossy, like weird like transition to shading effect happening. So if you're like pulled it in, you're like, that doesn't really look right, that doesn't look like a cupcake, it's probably just because you haven't changed it to be read as a non-color image. So that's just an easy fix. And now, so that's like the most basic information of pulling it in, but there are going to be occasions where, depending on the scale you're working at and the scale of the textures, you might need to change this up. So this one is actually, it fits on pretty nicely, so I got lucky. But say I wanted this texture to be smaller on my cupcake. I can add even more information being input into this image to tell it what like size it is, how it's being placed on my object. So we're going to add some more nodes. Again, like if yours works, if it matches up nicely, this might be how your final material layout looks like. it has a base color, you messed around with the specular roughness, and then you just attached a normal map by putting in the image, assigning it as a normal map, and then connecting it to the normal input section. If you do need to mess around with sizing, which I'm assuming will happen pretty often for you guys, there is just like a few more additional steps of like connections you need to make. But if you just like, maybe I'll screenshot this and like post what like your final layouts might look like, so it won't be too confusing. So to change the scaling of this image, I'm going to do Shift A. Again, we're under Vector. In this case, we want Mapping. And just left click right away. So Mapping, you can see, oh, my face is like still censoring children right now. Come back. Oh, that's my whole screen. I just want my face. Okay. So this has words similar to like our vertex like information, like location, rotation, scale. So we're going to be using this to change the location, rotation, and scale of this image being laid onto our cupcake. And first we need to connect this, so we need to connect the output into the input. So vector to vector. It looks like it undid everything you did. All your hard work is gone. But that's just because you need to tell the mapping how to look at your object. And this is going to come up in more advanced versions of working with materials with our UV editing. But if we just like look at this little graph, and also that graph in the bottom left corner that I have now blocked with my face, this is our UV map, which, as I mentioned, it's like similar to an X and Y graph where it's U, V, like a two-directional graph, but this defines like the direction of faces on your object. So we want to tell our image to be mapped onto our UV. So to do that, if I remember how to do this, I think it's an input. Yes, so texture coordinate. So ignore that UV. This is if I actually like made a UV map, which you'll understand in the future, where it's basically where you make like a knitting, not knitting, like a sewing pattern out of your object. Like you flatten out the meshes so it looks like some kind of like fabric pattern that you'd use to like form a stuffed animal or something. But for now, texture coordinate. So I did Shift A, input, texture coordinate, left click. And these are all the options. I don't know when you would use the other ones, but we're going to be using UV. And now you can see when we connected it, we have our normal map back safe and sound. And now you can go in and mess around with the scale and rotation and location. So location is kind of like just starting the image at a different point of your UV map. So it's just like moving around your cupcake. So it's a seamless texture, so it's not really going to have a big effect, but it's just going to change like where the detailing is placed on your object. Rotation would be like, you can't see it too well. It's rotating how that image is placed on it. The one I foresee you guys using the most though is scale. So if this pattern looked too big on my cupcake, I would want to increase the number of X and Y. Z shouldn't do anything because it's just like a 2D plane it's looking at. But say I wanted my detailing to look 5 times smaller, I'm going to put 5 in both X and Y, and you can see it shrank. So again, this is that inverse logic where the bigger number makes your detailing smaller, but that's just because it's putting 5 images to define an area, so it's like squishing down the image so that 5 can fit in rather than 1. And if you want it to look larger than the default, if I remember how to type, I can put like a fraction. So I could put like 0.5 and it'll stretch it out. And you can of course, usually I do these like an equal amount of change to keep it proportional, but there might be instances where you want to like change them differently, so you can do that as well. So now like meaningful pause once I remember how to move my camera. So this might be your like final map. So the shader info, using a normal map with this image, with these two graphs defining how that image is scaled. And to finish up this class, I just want to show then how you might plug in the rest of those maps that came with your package that you downloaded from CC0. So this is going to be relevant for if you're doing like wood, you'd probably import in some images, fabric, if you had like a marble vase or anything. So I'm going to do my backdrop with some fabric. So I went in, I just found a fabric material I liked. It usually takes me like 3 tries to find something, so I don't actually know if I like this one yet. So we're going to make a material. I clicked on my backdrop. I can hit plus new, go in and label it M fabric. It's going to give me an empty map because I haven't put any information yet. And rather than going in and like changing these sliders, I'm just going to plug in the images that it gave me. So I have the color, displacement, a normal map. What else do I have? I'm just going to pull them all in. I probably won't use all of these. Roughness. Okay, so it gave me 5. Really, it's going to vary depending on what type of material it's making. A lot of them are going to have ambient occlusion, which don't worry about what that means for now, but you don't actually need to input those into Blender because I think it's automatic within Blender to just do that. But ambient occlusion is kind of like more detail in the shading. So the ones we especially want are color, probably our normal map. We can plug in our displacement. Show you what that does. I don't think I'm going to put opacity in. Something like opacity, we'll get into probably next class. So if you were making something like some kind of mesh, so like a metal mesh or like a wire mesh, where you can just model like a flat rectangle. So in your viewport, in the shaded view, it's just going to be like a shaded gray rectangle. But you could put on an opacity map, it's called an alpha map, to tell Blender what parts are like transparent or like not actually mesh and what is. So again, we'll get into this later, but if you're doing a leaf, rather than modeling a leaf, you can just put an alpha map of a leaf on a rectangle and it'll make a leaf shape. So it's really handy in certain cases. But we'll just use the ones that you guys will probably use the most. So first thing I'm going to do is change how these maps are being used, where they need to be changed. The color one is the one you won't need to change because I do want it to be used as a color image. So that RGB option is correct for color. So I'm just going to close this for now. Roughness, if we go up here, I don't know which one roughness is. But roughness is just going to be a black and white map, so it's not color, non-color. Close him. Normal map, we just went over, is non-color. Close them up. And then displacement is also going to be non-color, so mostly everything is going to be non-color. Keep those together. So first we want to plug in our color image, and to do that we're just going to drag this output color into our input base color. And we have massive like wool knitting. It's like those massive wool blankets. It's got some stretch happening. So this is color. This is why we need to add like the normal map, is even though this has like the darkness of where like those divots are, it looks just like a flat picture that's being laid across. So there's our color. Let's put in roughness. So roughness is the same as our specular roughness that we were needing to use. So you can always just like mess around with that manually, or you can bring in a roughness map. For something like rusty metal, the roughness map is going to matter because the roughness of the rust is going to differ from the actual like cleaner metal. So more detailed materials will call for these actual like connecting the images depending on like the situation. But we'll connect that. So you can see it's not like shiny, not a shiny wool blankie anymore. Collapse that. And now we have to make that whole mess. That was our normal map. So Shift A, vector, normal map. We can connect that. If that doesn't seem like it's changing too much, you can then bring in, so it's like kind of like affecting like the darker areas, but if we need a little bit more detailing, we could bring in our displacement map. So this is going to make a more like intertwined web where you're going to combine these maps to produce this normal. So again, this will be a little confusing. Whether you put in the displacement is more just like if you are real excited about doing materials. So those of you that are like, wow, I have a blankie, let's keep going, continue following. Otherwise, those of you that aren't happy or with materials can be happy with your blankie once you scale this down, once it's not so massive. So to combine these, we're going to add that bump vector again. And you can see there's a normal section on there. So rather than connecting your normal map, I'm going to collapse stuff. Rather than connecting your normal to the normal of your material, if you connect it to the bump map. Oh, also, I guess I should explain, if you ever need to like disconnect stuff, you can just like drag it away. So I've just been left clicking and dragging, left click and undrag. Also, if you ever need to like delete stuff, you can just select it and then hit delete. If you do happen to delete your whole material, you're going to get this hot pink color, and this is your sign that there is no material in existence for your object. Everything has like a generic material on it, but if you just delete the object you assigned, it's not going to have a material at all, and I think it'll show up like hot pink in your final render. Okay, so we connected our normal map to the normal section of our bump, and now we want to connect our displacement to the height. And let me do this first. So I connected normal to normal again. So this is it just with that normal map, and this is it with the displacement map. Oh my gosh. So now it looks like a spiky wool blanket. So the issue here is it's trying to like pretend stick out too far. So I think if we just decrease our distance, or maybe our strength, it'll fix it. So if you play around with these values, let me go back to distance, 0.5, 0.2, 0.1, that's kind of looking alright. I think our main issue is it's just like so big. So again, if we wanted to change the scale of it, that's when we would go in with our mapping, which is under vector. And this time we have 4 images that are connected. So because these are all like based off of the same scale of mapping, you usually will want these all to match. So you're all just going to connect them to that mapping info. And right now it's not working because we haven't said how it's addressing our mesh, or in this case it's a surface. But our object, so we want to get that texture coordinate that is under input and attach UV to vector. And now you can go in, let's just like double this for now. Ooh, that stretch. So this would be a case where I wouldn't type these values in the same. But you could go in, play around with the values of these. This stretch that's happening, so these are like clumped up. This is stretched out. This is a scenario where future classes are going to come in handy to do UV editing, because it just has to do with, on your meshes, it's the scaling of your faces. It's putting the same amount of like information into each face, but if it's smaller, it's going to look smaller. If it's larger, it's going to stretch it out more. So UV unwrapping is going to like fix that issue, which we'll address later. If you're still not happy with your material after you've input everything, altered everything, it could just be you didn't find a really good resource to use. So you could just go back in, find a different fabric, find a different wood, and try inputting all of that. But let me like make this look nice so you guys can see my final mess. Or I guess this is connected to that, and then everybody's connected to my map. So orange guys are my images. They're connected in to my material. The normal information though needs to have definitions of how they're being used. And the bump in this case is how we're combining 2 maps. So I'm assuming this will be confusing, but because normal is the same thing where it's like affecting that fake texturing, and these both do that, they're both uniting as one to do that normal. And then our mapping is defining the sizing, the scaling of those images, and then texture coordinate is saying just how the mapping is working relative to your object. So that's all we're going to go over today. So a lot of new material. As long as you remember base color, your specular roughness, and your normal map for the most basic materials. Next class we'll go into more of these options, so subsurface, metallic, transmission for glass. So we'll dig a little bit deeper next class. I'll see you guys then.